survivors.
So if you have to divide the Indian market as per your famous newsletter, greed and fear, which part of the Indian market to your mind comes under overrated or greed category? Which part of the market to your mind comes under the fear category?
No, there's nowhere where we have the greed category in India today. We had the greed category previously in the profitless tech thematic, which was still hadn't completely blown up when I was here last. Those are all these listings, you know, the companies with the sort of new age economy being funded by private equity. So some of those came to market in India, some of the better, and they corrected sharply, along with the correction in those names in the US. But the survivors could do very well. So I don't think we have anywhere of greed in India.
Would you say real estate still comes under that category fear because the disbelief is still high, even though everybody knows real estate sector is moving in the right direction, but still there's a denial and a rebuttal.
Yeah, but it's not complete fear because they are beginning to.
Chris, financials, and let's spend some time because that's the core overweight for India and the core overweight for institutional investors. Financials, they follow a cycle. Sometimes it's a credit cycle advantage, sometimes it's the NPA cycle which we need to track. Where do you think the Indian banking credit cycle currently is at? Is it at a young nascent stage or it is at a mature and nearing a peak stage?
No, I think it's at it's at a relatively young nascent stage because the NPLs based on our charts have basically been cleaned up in the regular banks. Obviously, the non-bank financial sector had its problems, which are basically cleaned up. And it doesn't appear that the system's over-leveraged. There has been growth in unsecured consumer lending, so that we may see some regulatory intervention to try and preemptively address unsecured consumer lending. But my base case is it's not an advanced stage, no. And the other point, which we were addressing before this earlier, is just that the formalization of the economy by all these various digital initiatives just mean a lot of people are entering the economy because of the GST tax. So the GST registrations are well up. So there's probably a lot of small corporates out there who were not basically in the formal system. Now they're in the formal system. So that means they can now borrow from a bank as opposed to borrowing from the unofficial lending market where the rate of borrowing would have been higher. So basically there's a secular change in the business opportunity for the legitimate banks.
Has the decline in crude prices delightfully surprised you?
Yes, it has this year. Yes, it has, because China was. The question on the decline in crude prices was seen, is that the oil market discounting a US recession, or is it just something technical? The other issue is, why hasn't the oil markets received more of a boost from the reopening of the Chinese economy? So on the latter, I believe the Chinese economy, the Chinese stocks are acting like the Chinese economy is collapsing. But actually, the Chinese economy is not booming, but it's definitely, it's improving. So what I've heard on that is that the Chinese stockpiled a lot of oil during the last year or more. So they did opposite from the Americans. The Americans used up a lot of their strategic reserve, and the Chinese did the opposite. But the longer time goes on, the more we should get a boost to demand coming from China. So the real issue is, are we going to have a real recession in the US and Europe? Otherwise, the oil's weakness looks a bit strange.
You added
but anyway, India is obviously able to buy the cheaper oil. So that's been a huge positive, and that will continue.
When we spoke exactly a year ago, you added ONGC into your portfolio. You were bullish on Reliance, and that was a play on the oil cycle.
Well, it's partly a play on the oil cycle, but it's also just partly to hedge the risk that something happened geopolitically to cause oil to go to $150, which would be a negative. So I keep those two stocks in my portfolio. That obviously they were, since I was here, you had that windfall tax.
Yes, yes.
So that's made these stocks less attractive than what they were before, because they're not as geared to higher oil prices as they used to be.
When you reached India,